Okay, so that gets us to, now that we've gone through one of those, that's one of those steps. URL rewrites one of those steps before we can figure out exactly where we're headed with our request. That's where we get to request routing. Sorry, I don't know, how legible is that in the book? Not legible at all, or? Okay. Well, that's okay, because I have it spelled out right here. So as we've toured through the code so far, we initialize our application. We get our front controller object. That one will in turn kick off the routers. Each routers will basically be checked to see if check the URL, see if they can match, or our actual real URL from the database. And so then we've gone all the way up to here. Now, if the match is found, then we start. Basically, finding the match means finding, connecting configuration to some module controller space. Okay? And a match will involve both the controller file and the path on which that file is found, and a method inside that file. Okay? And methods inside of controller files are called actions. And in fact, any method that you hit from your browser, for example, catalog, category, view, ID 10, that actually connects to the catalog module, category controller, and a method inside there called view action. So basically, any method inside a controller file that needs to be accessed via a browser call will end in action. Okay, we'll see this in just a second. So the action, these action classes will instantiate the layout objects. So that's either mage app get layout, but in the context of controllers, we can just call this get layout. And then the layout object will actually, the layout object is what knows about the layout XML in the system. All right. And if we specify in our controller, we will generate the all of the blocks that we need based on layout configuration, and then we render them. Okay, that's an overview. We'll be getting our hands on this, I believe, starting with the end of this lesson. So, real quickly, the routers. You have the admin router and the standard router. Admin handles admin stuff, so things that are going on in admin HTML. Standard router handles things that are going on in the front end. It's not often. It's not often. It's very, very rare that you would need to make a custom router. An example of a custom router, though, is the CMS router, and that's really that's part of how we have our how the CMS system can be used for the home page. And then there's the default router that I showed you, that if you recall in that init action is just added explicitly at the end, and that's the one that just handles 404s using the CMS system. It's all just a big happy family of routers. All right, so yeah, there's a lot of text on this slide. So match, basically, again, we look at the path and we look at our configuration. And we look at our, in terms of processing requests, path, configuration, our module information, and the files that we have under our module. That's the gist of this slide. This slide is just an interjected reminder that all certain requests come to index.php. Front controller is used to assemble the routers and find out exactly where we're going to route this, and that you have the ability to add routers if you so need. Okay. Back to the lesson. We take index.php, calls mage run, Mage Core Controller Variant Front. This was the class that we opened a little earlier. And then all of these routers are inspected for possible matches. And what you don't see here is the default router, which would be added last. So another way of looking at this is basically the request comes in. Each router says, "Hey," each router is asked, "Do you have a match for this?" And it's either false, so we keep on looking, or it's true, and then we dispatch. Okay. I know I'm flying through this, but that's because this is background information. This is fundamentals of development, not fundamentals of Magento routing. Fortunately, we're not spending a week on this. So, executing controller actions. All right, so what we need to do is we need to use our request object. So basically think of a transport for this request that's come in and a transport for this response that we're going to send out. So once we've actually satisfied our, once we've found a suitable match here, the request object will actually set our module name, controller name, and actual name, or action name, and then set dispatch to true, and then we dispatch ourselves. Okay. Again, a little bit more of the internals. Bear with me just a moment. This is how router configuration happens. This is where the admin and the standard routers are declared in app etc config. Just if you want to see that. And if you see in, I believe it's in variant controller front, there's actually a class constant that refers to the web routers node. So this is actually another example. If you recall yesterday, I mentioned that what we would have under config default is copied into each store scope. Well, here would be an example of the default store scope. And so we could add something in there. We could actually add instructions there for these web routers via the default node if we wanted. Again, I personally have not had a use case where I needed to make a custom router. I had a use case actually where I could have used a custom router, but I was way too early in my Magento development, so I did a lot of extra work. Okay, so now this is the part where we're going to really start connecting with the work that you guys will be doing, I think, day in and day out. So in this case, we are doing something in the front end. I know that because we're dealing with the standard router. So what we have is this sequence: base URL and optionally store code. Module name, controller name, action name, and then after that parameters. This is similar. If some of you have used some other systems, you'll recognize this convention. What this looks like as an example URL. This URL does not actually exist anywhere in Magento. CMS is the module name, install is the controller name, and create user would be the action name. So in my CMS module, in the little c controllers file, C controllers, I would have an install controller class, and inside install controller, I would have a create user action method. We'll be doing this in just a second. So, but just recognize this pattern. So in the case of our, when we were looking at the category URL rewrites, we saw that like furniture.html was getting rewritten, or was being mapped internally to catalog, category, view, ID 10. Well, that would be catalog, category, view, ID 10. So it's really these first three that matter. And if one of these two isn't specified, index is assumed. That's just a long-standing convention. Okay? Feel free to stop me now if you'd like a little more explanation. We will be going into this a little bit deeper. Obviously, we're going to be working through the configuration, because that's the ultimate goal of this lesson, is to connect configuration XML to our request. Basically, like, how do we get our request? How do we get a request into our module? All right. so let's see. There is, in the standard router, there is this get default path method. And this, by default, is when you install Magento, the CMS system is used as the default router. It is used as the default path, and basically that's how the home page that's configured in the CMS is mapped. So it's possible, however, if you are so inclined. So by default in Magento, let's see, let's look at this. So system configuration. So again, this slide here is talking about what happens when we go to site.com, and we haven't specified a front name. Yeah. Well, actually, let me go back here. This module name here, really, that should be front name, because that's what it's called. That's the actual configuration node in Magento. I'm going to change that. It's we're dealing with the module here, but what you will actually see, the actual node in the configuration, is called front name. So that's why I made that change. All right, and what we're doing here is we're talking about what happens at that default URL, at that base URL with no front name specified. So in the admin, that system configuration, let's see, oh, I'm already here, yay. Let's see, is it web? Yeah, under web, default pages. Default web URL. Here is specified CMS in this line up here. And actually, once we specify the front name, remember what I just said, index is assumed for the other two parts. So really, I could also have CMS/index/index here and have the same effect. I would still get my home page. So this is just a little configuration piece to get us through to get us to connect the CMS system to that route. All right. So anyway, that's what this slide is all about. What we do with that request with absolutely no information on it. All right, so there are some other tools here. Redirect method.
This will optionally take a module name, controller name, and an action name.
So this would redirect to the checkout module, cart controller, index action. Okay. Anywhere in the system, you could actually pass in a path to this get URL function, and then there's this different syntax array of arguments. I don't have time to go in depth into these, but could also specify a route using this. I guess using checkout cart index, passing into these, setting these params manually. These are the two that you will use. If you need to do an external, like a direct redirect to an external URL, you would just use instead of redirect, which will try and map something internal, you would use this redirect URL. Is that in your notes for this slide? We just updated a bunch of the notes, but I didn't know if that was in there or not. So you would specify in, just handy things to know. So this is something you can do inside your controller file. So say you've got some, how does this apply? Say you have, this is used, for example, in the customer module, redirect. So if someone tries to log in and they've provided invalid credentials, well, you just call redirect, kick them back to the, maybe set an error message and kick them back to that login page. So this stuff is used all the time. And if you want to have fun, you can just redirect to one module and have that redirect back. Hit that error message. Again, this is a reminder, this is what we've all gone through. Okay? So, index.php calls mage run, calls app run, do some configuration stuff, kick off our request object, and try and dispatch. We're just showing you an admin HTML controller here. So basically what's happened is we're extending from a particular action class. And in here we have an index action. This index action, we're setting some data on this object, calling another function, but then calling render layout. All right? So, but this is the structure here is that you might have some internal functions. But basically, the takeaway is that anything that doesn't end in anything that's public and ends in action can be accessed from the browser. Anything else cannot. Okay? All right. So let's look at an action. For example, so in some controller file, we have an index action. In that index action, we're calling load layout. So this is getting our layout object and getting, which basically allows us to access all of our layout XML. And then we do some stuff, and then we call render layout. Those are the two big pieces. Load layout, render layout. Okay? Load layout and render layout are typically what happens. We're actually going to be working with controllers and actions in a different way, but that's the most common because that's how we just leverage the layout XML system. All right? So, configuration. In this case, again, we're configuring in certain areas. So in the front end area, under the routers node, we add the CMS router. Okay? So this connects a front name with a module name, and there's and gives us a spot in the configuration in which to do it. So when I see this, I know that the Mage CMS module, all the URLs that use this, the very first part of the URL is going to have CMS. That's why I changed that slide to say front name. And even though we're in the front end, we're specifying a standard router here. It's kind of a bit of a duplication of information, but it would be technically possible to have more than one router for the different areas. So we actually have to specify this. So here's the pattern. Front end routers. So config, area, routers, and then a unique node for us. Use and args. So use would be standard in the case of front end and admin in the case of admin HTML. And in the args node, we specify our module. So and if you recognize, this is going to basically, if we think about our module registration file, the same value that we put in our module registration file is what we would put in here. So for my example for foobar, and this is literally used to match a path to our controller files, because remember, these controller files can't be loaded by the autoloader, so the system has to load them differently. So we use Mage CMS here, and then that's connected with this front name. Okay, we'll be doing this a good bit. This will be part of the rest of the modules that we do for the most part. So we'll get a lot of experience. Okay, so you have, I think you now have a decent explanation of all of this configuration in here. There's actually two different. This is a mixture of two different types of configuration, and the explanation in the book is, I think, sufficient. And I don't know if it says it or not, but this is also deprecated. It's still possible, and you still may encounter it in the wild. especially if you have some older module that you're implementing or if you're a service provider, an older website. That brings us to, actually I'm going to skip the next slide because this is how we do rewrites now. Okay? So, take a moment and remember, so just like in the previous slide, we had front end, routers, and CMS. In this case, we're doing something with a catalog. Okay? But if you recall, so front end, routers, catalog, we had an args node, right? And that's where we had our module node and front name node. Well, if in our module we want to rewrite a controller, we can access it this way. We actually get into the exact same spot, front end, routers, catalog, args. See, front end, routers, catalog, args. And we add to modules node. And all we do here is simply insert a path, either ahead of or behind another path. So, what does this mean functionally? This means that when we're trying to match a route, so say catalog, well, we're going to try and find, we're going to match that. We'll match that based on the front name here, and then based on this front name, we'll look for a modules node adjacent to that. And if we do have a modules node, before Magento goes to look in Mage catalog, little c controllers, Magento will look in my module catalog, little c controllers. Pretty cool. This is much easier than the ways that we had to do it in the past. Much easier. So, all we do here is reference, again, this node just needs to be distinct. And we reference some other module node, some other module value here. So this, what we put in before or after, will equal this. And this will be the path without little c controllers appended to the end, okay? And we're going to do a rewrite as part of our example for this lesson. So why would you ever need to use after? I mean, you would think, okay, so if I want to do catalog product view, well then I would have my module catalog, I would have my controllers, and then I would have to have a catalog controller with a product action, or I'm sorry, I would have to have a product controller with a view action. Okay, and if mine's before, well, finds mine first. So but most of the time, say I have some custom functionality, some custom route that the core catalog controller doesn't have. Most of the time, we're going to be dealing with that core. We'll be dealing with core routes then. Maybe only occasionally we'll be accessing ours. I can put mine after because Magento won't match Mage catalog. So I say I have product controller with a foo action.
Oh.
I love that light bulb sound.
That is amazing.
Isn't it cool?
Just if it doesn't find it.
So if it doesn't, yeah. So if
To the index.
so exactly. So all of a sudden I put something on a page and somebody can click product foo, right? So basically they're going to site.com catalog product foo, which is product controller foo action. Well, that doesn't exist in the Mage catalog product controller, but if it doesn't find it there, well, my path is next in the lookup scheme. So it's going to check my product controller for a foo action. And if it finds it, hey, it's got its content. If it doesn't find it there, then it'll 404. So this is why now we can, now your modules will have the admin HTML files contained within themselves. And you don't have to do any kind of crazy URL schemes. So this is very cool stuff. This was just a breath of fresh air. So, what would that look like? Well, So in my foobar module, I need to get into my configuration. So let's say I want to go to, let's see, first thing I need to do is let the system know about my router. So that would look like an area node. So in this case front end, we're going to do something just in the front end. And the next node will always be routers. So you can just remember area and then routers. So this would be front end or admin. And then in routers, we just need what? We need a node for ourselves. By convention, again, I prefer to use this class group name that I'm using everywhere else. So I'll take my module name and my namespace and use that. Okay. Once I'm in here, I actually have to link my route up with one of the routers. And if we're in the front end, we'll use standard router. In the admin, we would be using the admin router. Okay? So these two things have basically two parameters for you to consider, just as far as kind of recipes that you can use when you're working with controllers. Okay, so our next step then we need to pass in our args. So for our args, we need a couple of pieces of information. And the reason we need these two pieces of information is because we actually have to give Magento more information than we do for models, helpers, and blocks, because these controllers can't be accessed via the autoloader. So the way we do that is by specifying a module node. And the module node is going to match our module's node in our registration file. So if I have any doubt about what I put here, I could actually refer back to app etc modules. It basically should match whatever I have in here. And the reason it should match whatever I have in here is because this is just simply a path. But instead of a slash, we have an underscore. And then the last piece of information that we need is how we get to our route via the browser, via some URL. And this is going to be the very first part of the URL. So I might say foo. After I have this, so some other frameworks, systems will, you would just create files without any need to configure anything, and the fact that you put a file in a particular folder would make that route work in that application. Magento has this extra step in here because we do have all this need to be able to rewrite functionality from one module to another. So up to this point, I have to feed Magento everything. After this point, though, everything else, every other route in my module, it's just based on my file structure. So let's see. All right. So I can now go to site.com, and the system will know what to do with my request because this is my front name. And it's my front name because I said it was my front name. If I change that value in there in front name to anything else, I would need to access my module through whatever new value I put in there. So right now, this would actually map without me specifying anything else to index controller index action. So front name is always configured. All right. Controller name the controller name is just a matter of matching a path after the path that I've given, I've configured for my front name. So front name is used to match a module name or a module path, foobar. And then in there, I will take this, and in this case, so I have, let me see, how can I write this a little differently here? So my front name, in this case, is going to be, it's going to tell me foo, bar, and then controllers. And it's the application that does this. We don't specify this in here. So, with my controller, then is just a file that'll be found after this. Okay? So, for example, in this case, we have index controller. And this is just simply how your files are named for controller files. So, foobar controllers index would mean indexcontroller.php. So, this here matches up with that. And then you would just, when you're making the file, you just append controller.php onto it. Okay? Again, specified in the code. And then internally, inside of this class, and this class would be foo bar index controller. All right. Inside of this class is going to be, I hope, an index action. All right. Any questions? Yes?
This won't follow the directory structure, like foobar, controller?
Yes. This would follow directory structure. So if you have multiple paths in there, then you have to, so if you have foo/bar, you can go down that chain, yes. In fact, and there are many places in the code that do this. I'll take a look at that in a second, and we can look at the names. Most of the time, you're probably going to have this one layer, just this one level of controllers. But yeah, we'll take a look at that in just a second. So, yeah, that's actually a good kind of intuition about what the system's going to do with this. So, yeah, again, this is going to, up to this point is configuration, okay? And that's the front name. After this point, it's all just file system paths. And a lot of this has to do with just keeping these files secure from just hack attempts of just, manually being able to call a URL and just automatically loading a controller file and being able to run some code. Okay? So I think this may be about as well as I can point out the different parts and pieces. Again, you would read it as front name, so front name, module, and configuration to controller file, and then eventually, this piece here will be the action. So makes a lot more sense once we start working with it, I think. So I have foo/bar. All right, there's foo. Okay, so let's see. Let's take, that means I probably need to make a controllers file next, or a controllers folder, excuse me. So in my module, foo/bar, I need a little c controllers. Did I do that again? I did. All right. And inside here, I need to make, at this point, again, and in a way not unlike with the blocks and the model and helper configurations, once we have our configuration in place, we don't have to declare anything else. We've given Magento everything it needs, and then we just need to get the routes right. So, PHP class here, I'm going to call this the pasta controller. So, and the pattern that you use to name these, the class that is expected. Oh, sorry, I misnamed that. So you should change that to, sorry, pasta controller. There we go. So, with a capital C. So this file will be found at appcode local foo/bar controllers pasta controller.php. Okay. And then the naming is the module name, or namespace and module name, which is foo/bar, and then pasta controller. So, we need to extend something now. Mage core controller front action. So Mage core controller front action. That's what you extend for controllers on the front end. Okay? Now, in here, I just need some action. So let me see. Public function sleep action. Okay, this should work. So, what's my route going to look like? If I want to see this output. Foo, pasta, sleep. So, my front name, foo, whatever I've named my controller, pasta in this case, pasta controller, because why not? And then, if I want to get to this action in there, well, sleep. Sleep. So, let's see if that works. Yay! Okay, so silly example, but the implication is actually pretty big. You now know how to add to your module configuration and get a request to your module. That's like the last missing piece. We've shown you how to set up blocks and models and helpers. Controllers was like the last big frontier for now. Well, what we need to do is grab, when we do a rewrite, first stop is configuration. Actually, yeah, first stop is configuration. So in here, for routers, I could specify, and I don't need anything configured here if I'm just doing a rewrite. But I could specify. So I want to do something with the category view. All right, so catalog category view. In fact, how would I know? How would I know where to go for this? All I see is furniture.html. One of the tricks that I use is to look at the class, which is appended to the body tag. Catalog category view. In fact, it's the exact same function that appends that there that is used for, I know for the layout object, and generally will match our catalog is our front name, category is our controller, and view is our action. So look at the body. Look at the body class and see that first class in there generally is all the information you need. So I know catalog here, that's very handy. I can use that. So I will say catalog. And again, all I need to do is specify the same XPath. So catalog, args. So you can see in a similar way how we have front-end, routers, args. I have front-end, routers, args. And I'm just putting my stuff into the catalog node, which was already defined. All right? And then in here, I only need to specify this modules node. Okay? And then inside of modules, I just need something unique, so I can say bar. Before, exactly, I have to use before because I want to change an existing route. So before mage catalog. And then I'm going to say foo bar. And that is going to map to foo bar controllers. All right? Or I could say foo bar catalog. Actually, I'll do that as an example because that might be Huh? No.
Correct.
Right. So no, that's a very good question. That's a very good question because all we're doing here is providing a path that is evaluated when the system is looking up a front name. So when a system looks up a front name, it looks for a path here. Okay. So all we're doing is providing another path. So what I do need. Let me know if this clears it up for you. What I do need then is what am I overriding? I'm overriding. I need to say, okay, so what? Basically, I have to match the rest of this. So again, this is configuration. So on this front name here, or in this case, well, catalog, on that front name, I get up to here, and then it's up to me to name things correctly in my file system to match the request, which means, I have to think about my request again. I'm requesting catalog category view. That tells me that under here, I'm going to need a category controller because the beginning path here gets me up to the point of where I have my controllers. But after that, I've got to figure out where, I've got to provide the correct path. Now, I normally, actually, when I'm doing controller rewrites, I normally break them out into their own module. So I'm actually curious about the syntax here. So let's see what we can do with this. All right, so I need a category controller with a view action. All right. So I'm going to need, let me see, foobar model. Let me see, foobar, and then I think, if I remember correctly, Magento likes to insert controllers after that second directory. So I believe that in here, controllers, and here I am throwing another audible, so we'll see how well this works. But I'll do catalog, and in here I'll specify a category controller file. So my paths still have to match up. So foobar, catalog, category controller. All this junk. And I'm not going to put the path yet in case I got it wrong. And then here we need to extend. Well, I mean, if I were totally replacing the functionality, I could just extend from MageCore variant front action. But I want to extend from the original, say I want to extend from the original catalog or category controller. That's where I would need to include it. So require once, and it'll be app. And technically the correct way to do it is to use the directory separator constants, which are set up in mage.php. So app code, oops. App code core mage. App code core mage. Catalog. Hey. And then, oops, directory separator, controllers, directory separator. category controller.php. This is tragically, just tragically not graceful. Oops, I don't think I'm going to be able to get this all in here. Wow. Yeah, that's a pretty long one. But once I've included that, then I can extend and then if I specify a view action, and let me test this real fast, see if that was correct. Nope. Let's see.
Actually, inquire once, you can start from a name.
Oh, that's actually you're absolutely right. In fact, that's the better way to do that. So, what Adam just pointed out was that you can start from age, and we can start from age, of course, because of the include paths. In fact, and that's why this would actually be better, because if we were overriding this in our local, it would be found there first. So this would be much better. So now I'm curious to find out why it didn't work. All right. So let me see. Front end routers, catalog, args, modules, bar before, Mage catalog, bar catalog. Well, okay. Let's see.
You probably need to call parents. View.
There we go. Did I just not save the file? I must not have just, maybe I didn't save the file. Okay, so I was thankfully correct that yes, Magento will put that controllers directory after that second level of that second level of folders. So in this case, that means that even though I'd specified in my config file foobar catalog, it would be perfect. You would be perfectly reasonable of you to expect foobar catalog and then controllers, but Magento will stick that controllers directory right there after that second level. So foobar controllers catalog and then, okay? So what's the practical application of that?
You rewrite any controller?
Yeah, I mean, now I can rewrite any controller. Okay? So I can now do, if I need to do something different with all of the, basically every route to a category in the system, I can do that now using this. I now have overridden the category controller.